Missy Bauer with B&M Crop Consulting. We're out here to do another update on the nitrogen side of things. We talked with you about a week ago about after all the big rains to get out there and get some nitrates pulled. We had a lot of nitrates that came in this week, sent them into the lab, and some of the numbers started coming back. I'm back here today to basically alarm you again that probably if you haven't pulled samples, you need to pull samples. So out of the fields that got sent in, 70% of the fields do need some additional nitrogen, or what we call rescue nitrogen, put on. Ranging anywhere from about 30 pounds to about 60 pounds extra that we're going to still put on. How do we get that on? Well, if we have the pivots, obviously it can still be part of your fertigation program. We're probably just going to be increasing your rates. We're going in otherwise with a Y-drop rescue, or our last choice would be a dry spread with urea ammonium sulfate. But our preference certainly would be the liquid over that, just because it can be banded and we can get it into the plant a little bit quicker. But the numbers definitely come back. I would say even maybe lower than what we were expecting. I was thinking maybe about half or so of the fields to a third would need additional nitrogen, but it looks like it's going to be a much higher number than that. Like I said, at this point we're at 70% of the fields need additional nitrogen on them. So if you haven't pulled your samples, you can watch the video from last week, get them pulled first thing on Monday, and get them into your lab so that you can have time to react and maybe get some things applied next week. Other thing to kind of keep an eye out for while you're in those fields is definitely just going to be, do you see any deficiency yet? If you recall, nitrogen deficiency starts from the bottom of the plant, okay? And it'll do what we call fire up. So you can see we've already lost this bottom or lower leaf here. This one's all totally yellow. This leaf here then is the one that's showing what we call the traditional V pattern here. Where you can kind of see the yellow makes a V shape coming down into the center of the rib here. And then the next leaf up is still green with just a little bit on the very tip starting to show. So that nitrogen deficiency starts in the bottom of the plant and then it'll work its way up. That's why we always talk about that firing up from the bottom. So when you are out pulling your nitrates, make sure you keep an eye for that as well. That's just going to tell us not only that your soil potentially could be low depending on what your numbers are, but also that that plant's low. You can also pull a tissue if you would like as well. Our other big concern last week was the fields that hadn't got their nitrogen on yet. So maybe had your pre-plant all on, but you had to come in and still Y-drop, where it's a little bit later of an application, and then all the rains happened and really pushed people out of these fields for way too long. If you're out there and still got to get your rest of your planned nitrogen program on, you need to see what's happening in your fields. In this case here, I was out of a field that did have a decent upfront nitrogen program, but we're sitting here at, V11, V12 corn, and we've all fired up. Okay, so we've done what we called gap this. So we've got a gap in the available nitrogen to get into this plant. So these bottom leaves have already fired off, and you can see it working up the plant. Can I correct this? I can get that nitrogen on and I can bring this plant back. But when we gap it like that, it's not uncommon at all to have that 25 to 30 bushel yield hit. So if you're in a scenario where you didn't get all your side dress done before this rain all occurred, you need to get a plan in place very, very quickly, because this is costing a lot of dollars right now for this corn to be looking like this. So you got to get your nitrogen out there as quickly as you can get across these fields to make that happen. So the last comment here today, make sure that you're not leaving this crop hanging. We've got a great looking crop across a large area this year. A lot of good yield potential, but we don't want to leave it hanging on nitrogen. If your reaction is to do nothing, I think you're going to be disappointed come yield time that you've given up a lot of bushels out here in the field.